This is the Smart Poker Study Podcast for players who are always striving to be better today than they were yesterday. Through strategy discussions, Q&As, and Poker Pro interviews, we'll dive deep into everything related to poker tactics, study techniques, and the mental side of the game. All in an effort to improve your skills, maximize your profits, and to make you a lifelong successful player. This podcast is brought to you by SmartPokerStudy.com, and I'm your host, Sky Matsuhashi. Poker people, make sure you check out episode 34, where I discussed fear in poker and how you can work to get beyond your fear through skill number 9 in Ed Miller's book, The Course. Hey, poker people, it's day 29 of my 30-day challenge to release a new podcast every day. Now that this podcast is in the books, one more to go. It's like my man DMX once said.
One more road to cross, one more risk to take. Gotta live my life like it's one more move to make.
Thanks, buddy. Okay, on to the pokers. This is the 10th and final episode in a 10-episode series where I break down an important aspect within each chapter of Ed Miller's book called The Course. Today we'll cover skill number 10, taking on the pros. This is another short but insightful chapter where Ed Miller tells you how to go about exploiting the pros at 5, 10, and above. As an episode overview, like the previous episodes in this series, I'll go through Chapter 10 by hitting each step in my 7-step process to getting the most from poker books. We'll discuss why you should learn to exploit regs, how to do so, and how much time to devote to it. You'll be challenged to put your leak exploiting to the test, and you'll be a stronger player for doing so. If you haven't already downloaded it, hit today's show notes page at smartpokerstudy.com/pod35 to get your own copy of the 7 Steps to Poker Book Learning PDF to follow along with everything today. And stick around to the end because I've got a special Amazon Prime Music contest to tell you about that's exclusive to my listeners. Now here it is, today's podcast mission. My mission for today is to teach you how to go about exploiting the weaknesses of the regs you encounter at your stakes, which will better prepare you when you move up in stakes. Alrighty, I'm sure you have that 7 Steps PDF open in front of you. Step number one was to skim, and I'm holding the course right here in front of me the last time I'm going through the book for the podcast. Definitely not the last time I'm going through the book in my poker career. I guarantee I'll be picking this book up a few times a year to refresh myself on the different skills. But to skim this chapter, so skill number 10, taking on the pros, there's some good stuff here. It says that at the 5-10 level, you'll always have some pros at the table. And he mentions there's 2 ways to get an edge on the pros. It's good stuff to read about there. Header number 1 is reversing live reads. And this is about using live tells against the pros and doing things that indicate weakness when you've got strength and vice versa. The next header, a few pages over, is finding their leaks, and this is the old-fashioned way of beating anyone, just outplaying them. And the final header of the entire book of this chapter is Game Theory Optimal Play. And GTO is, this whole chapter, or this part of the chapter it's less than a page long, but he says GTO, or Game Theory Optimal Play, is an optimal strategy that can't be beaten by any other strategy, and that beats any other strategy no matter what it is. He also gives some good recommendations on where to start your GTO journey, namely in the form of some books. He mentions Poker's 1%, The Mathematics of Poker, Applications of No Limit Hold'em, and Expert Heads Up No Limit Hold'em. I've heard about all of those books. I haven't read any of them yet. I own Poker's 1%, so that might be a book that we'll cover soon enough within this podcast, but the other ones too, eventually. I don't know how dry they are, how boring of a read they might be, but we'll give it a shot, you know? And of course, the chapter is only 10 pages long. So now that we've skimmed the chapter, we're on to step number 2, which is set a goal. And we have a basic understanding of the chapter, and we want to read it productively and effectively. To do this, I've devised 3 questions, and finding the answers to these is our goal while reading. Question number 1 is, what skills can I learn from this chapter? We'll learn how we can try to outplay and take advantage of some of the leaks that pros have. Question 2 is, why are these skills important or relevant to my game? Anything that helps me beat the pros and the regs in my games will only serve to make me a better player. And question number 3 is, how can I implement these skills in my game? Well, let's read and find out how we can exploit the pros. So, of course, this leads us to step number 3, which is read. And yeppers, another great chapter here. Ed Miller gives one simple way to give off fake live reads to the pros. He also gives some ideas into dissecting the leaks that pros have. And there's really so much to learn here, and I cannot break it all down within this podcast. So make sure you pick up your own copy of the course. If you haven't done so already, you can purchase the course through my Amazon affiliate link in the show notes for this page at smartpokerstudy.com/pod35. The ideas presented in this chapter feel quite beyond me and beyond the scope of this podcast. Chiefly the idea that I'll be playing against pros anytime soon. Maybe when I go to the WSOP and I'm playing in a large no-limit hold'em event, I might encounter 1 or 2 pros there. But for the most part, in the day-to-day life, I'm not encountering any at all. But I do encounter a ton of reg players at the level I play, and I'm sure all of you do as well. Reg players are, they're the ones that are a lot like us. They're at the tables looking to exploit the fish. They have stats like 21-16 and 18-14, and they play mostly a tag or tight aggressive game. Like us, they try to avoid other regs and zone in on isolating the fish that limp into pots, or they try to isolate the fish in the blinds. So, with the idea of regs in mind, I'd like to focus on one thing that Ed Miller said, and I quote, "Ultimately, if you want to maximize your potential at 5'10 and give yourself the chance to move even higher, you must learn to take on the pros." That's a great quote, and I think this is a perfect idea for us to dive into. So, after reading, we want to summarize and analyze step 4 in the 7-step process. And to summarize this, for us to be winners at any stake and to move up with greater skills, we've got to take on the regs, and not just take them on. We need to be able to figure out how to exploit the regs at our stakes. So that's the summary, a quick and easy summary. And to analyze this, I've actually asked myself 3 questions. Question number 1 is, why should we learn how to play against regs? Question number 2 is, how do we exploit these regs? And question number 3 is, how much time should I devote to studying the regs? So for question number 1, why should we learn how to play against regs? Well, there's 4 reasons here. The first reason is by learning to beat the regs at our stakes. We're learning how we ourselves can be beaten because we're also regs. Figuring out the common leaks of regs will give us insights into our own game and will spur us into creating defenses for these exploitations we'll be making against the regs. Reason number 2 for why we should learn to play regs. Number 2 is learning to beat the regs will force us to add skills and fix leaks, which will only serve to make our overall game even stronger and better prepare us for moving up in the levels. Reason number 3 is regs are just like any other player in that everyone is exploitable. And if we view them as something to totally stay away from, we're just missing possibly a great opportunity to make some money. And reason number 4, as we know from that question from LTU Maximus I answered back in episode 31, last week's Q&A, sometimes the tables are full of regs and we don't want to always avoid playing in these situations. We occasionally want to challenge them to see if we can take their money. And there are some regs who will take you on just as soon as they take on anybody else. So we've got to be ready to fight back in case we're in a fish-filled table, but this reg is just challenging us. We have to know how to fight back against them. Alright, so the second question I asked myself was, how do we exploit these regs? Well, I came up with 2 really good ways to exploit them. Number 1 is take a look at your leaks, label them, and figure out ways to exploit that leak. When you encounter a reg with that same leak, and careful observation or just plain old paying attention will help you spot the leak, use your list of exploits on them one at a time. For example, let's say they have a one-and-done leak. They only fire c-bets when bluffing on the flop and shut down on the turn. They'll never fire that second barrel if they're bluffing. Well, if you're in position, just call with any 2 cards, and when they check the turn, fire that half-pot bet. If you're out of position, check call the flop, and when they check back the turn, which means to check behind you, you're first to act, you check, they check, and this so the action goes to the river, fire at any river card that likely didn't help their range. And whether in position or out of position, when you've got a marginal hand like a mid-pocket pair or second pair or top pair weak kicker, you can call any flop, and if he fires the turn, just fold your hand. Yes, if you don't know, folding is an exploitative play when you know that your opponent is only firing with a strong hand. Bingo, bango, bongo! We've got 3 exploits right here with this one leak of being a one-and-done player. So an entry in your poker journal might look like this. Leak is one-and-done player. An exploitation of this, in position call the flop, fire on checked turns, Another exploitation would be out of position, check call the flop, fire on blank rivers after the checked turn. Great. And exploitation number 3, if you have a marginal hand, fold to a double barrel. And that's great right there. That's one way that we can easily exploit this one specific leak. So the first way to exploit was to find their leaks and exploit them. The second way to exploit these regs is dedicated study into the hands you have on one opponent. So I'm assuming most of you out there are online players and you are playing and recording all of your hands with some kind of poker tracking software. Hopefully it's Poker Tracker 4. That's the one I recommend. So if you've got a big sample size on an opponent, you can look at all the hands this guy has played and try to find leaks in his game and in his stats. Go back to episode 18 where I gave you a list of the common poker leaks and see if your opponent is suffering from any of these. And also, you can take the list of your own weaknesses and leaks that I helped you make back in episode 16 and see if this reg opponent is likely suffering these same weaknesses. Now that you've figured out his particular leaks and weaknesses by looking at his stats and looking at hand histories, make a plan to exploit them. So it kind of goes back to step number 1, but you're just doing a little bit more work off of the tables to find their leaks. And this entire approach is great because now you've got a list of exploits to make based on lots of different weaknesses that you can use over and over against other regs and against the fish that are out there. So the third question I asked myself was, how much time should I devote to beating the regs? And I've said this before plenty of times, we want to stay away from regs and target the fish at the tables. And I still believe this is true. The fish are your easiest source of income, so most of your study time should be dedicated to this. But you can incorporate some reg study time into your own time fixing leaks and tackling your weaknesses. So if for every leak or weakness you're working on, you dedicated 30 minutes to finding ways to exploit that leak, you would be a reg killer. You would be a killer of regs, as they say. So if you're tackling one leak or weakness of your own per week, then 30 minutes per week should be put into exploiting that same leak in your opponents. Alright, now that we've done that analyzing, it's time for step number 5, which is the most important step, taking action on what we've learned. I want you to take whatever leak you're working on and figure out 3 ways to exploit that leak. Review these in your next warm-up before you play, and remember, warm-ups I talked about in episode number 5, and as you play your session, try to spot this leak in others, both in regs and fish. Try your list of exploitations when you find this leak, and make sure you're taking notes on all instances and marking hands for later assessment. At the end of your session, answer the following questions. How do I feel about the session played? How did I like employing the skills learned? In this case, it's targeting the regs or finding their leaks and exploiting them. And the last question is, do I think this skill has some value and does it merit further review before fully integrating it into my repertoire? After taking action, step number 6, of course, is assessment. So the next day, you'll do an assessment of your session in a hand history review. Filter for the applicable hands and determine how well you played them. Whip out your notes, and as you do so, make sure you say this line.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Did your exploits work against both regs and fish? Did you make any mistakes in your assessment of your opponents? Were the spots you chose to use the exploits profitable and well-reasoned? How did your in-position play differ from your out-of-position play, and was one more successful than the other? Send any questionable hands to friends or post them in forums, or even send them to me for my opinion, and maybe I'll use it in a future Q&A. Take notes on all you learned in your session and in the assessment so you can refine your skills and continue to work on exploiting regs in future sessions. And of course, the final step in the 7-step process to learning from poker books is to rinse, repeat, review. Now that you've taken action and made this initial assessment, it's time to take action again in another session and work on exploiting these regs. Just repeat steps 5 to 7 here for as long as it takes until you feel you've got a great grasp on this concept. And, most importantly, every time you whip anything out, make sure you say the line.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
And if you don't get a laugh from those around you, they ain't worthy friends. Challenge! I've said it already, but I'll officially challenge you now. Take the current leak you're working on and write out 3 different ways to exploit it. Use those exploits in the next session you play against anyone with the same leak. Review any applicable hands in your assessment of the session. Refine your exploitations and put them to work again in the next session. Now it's time to take action and dippy-dippy-do something positive for your poker game.
Oh, that's it now. Get out there and be somebody. Go write a book.
All right, to recap, we talked about the final skill, number 10, in the course, and the seven 7 steps to getting the most from it. We discussed why you should learn to exploit regs, how to do so, and how much time to devote to it. I then challenged you to put your exploits to the test, and in doing so, you'll be making yourself a stronger player and a force for all to reckon with at the tables. Please go to the show notes at smartpokerstudy.com/pod35 for everything mentioned here, and make sure you pick up the 7 Steps to Poker Book Learning PDF. Thank you so much for listening today, and thank you also for listening through this 10-episode series on The Course by Ed Miller. I think this is one of the best poker books ever written. I can only hope to write something half as good one day. If you enjoyed this series and think I did Ed Miller's book any justice at all, please let him know if you ever tweet him or run into the guy. Send me your feedback through the show notes page. You can also send me an email to sky@smartpokerstudy.com, tweet me @smartpokerstudy, or post in the Facebook group at smartpokerstudy.com/discuss. And please send me your questions or ideas for podcast topics through all the channels just mentioned. And here's your chance to enter my Amazon Prime Music contest. Everyone who signs up for a free Amazon Prime Music trial will be entered into a contest to win a copy of The Freedom Journal. This is an incredible leather-bound book that helps you set and attain SMART goals in 100 days. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Just like I told you about back in episode 2. Way back in episode 2. I supported this on Kickstarter and received a few copies, and this is your chance to win one of my copies for free. All you have to do is sign up for the free 30-day trial to Amazon Prime Music through me and send me a screenshot of your free trial confirmation. With your free trial of Amazon Prime Music, you'll enjoy unlimited ad-free music streaming from thousands of playlists and stations, and this is the best part. Free 2-day shipping. And with you signing up through my affiliate, I get a little kickback for your free trial. So please visit the show notes at smartpokerstudy.com/pod35 and click on the music banner for this killer offer. The contest runs through February 29th, so get on it. Alrighty, poker people, be sure to come back for tomorrow's episode number 36, where I recap my 30-day challenge to post a new podcast every day. Don't worry, there will be some poker strategy mixed in with all the self-congratulatory talk. Word of mouth is the best advertising, and a recommendation from you to your friends would be most appreciated. If you enjoyed our time together and learned a little something, please share it with that Randy coworker of yours. Yes, nailed it! Thank you, Randy Affirmation from episode 34. Kinda sounds like a porn name, Randy Affirmation. Yeah, maybe Randy Johnson is better. Or Randy Cummings, I like that one. Or Randy Reynolds. Or Randy... Tripod. Ha, that's a good one. My porn name is Randy Tripod. Alrighty, until next time, study smart, play much, and make your next session the best one yet.